The night was heavy with smoke and strange smells. A lonely man walked through the alien bazaar, his coat pulled tight around his shoulders. He was tired, his heart empty, his pockets almost empty too. The market was not a normal place. It was full of shadows and whispers. Strange creatures shouted and bargained, selling things no human could understand. Glowing fruits, living weapons, bottles with moving light inside them. But in the darkest corner he saw something different. There stood a small stage made of old metal. On it were cages, and inside the cages were living beings, slaves, forgotten souls, sold like broken tools. The man's eyes moved past them until they stopped at one figure. A girl sat on the ground, her head covered with a dirty sack. Her hands were tied, her body weak. No one seemed interested in her. Above her cage, a sign was painted in rough letters. Price, 3 credits. The man frowned. 3 credits, only 3. That was the price of stale bread. Why was she so cheap? The seller, a fat alien with sharp teeth, laughed when he saw the man looking. You want her? 3 credits only, the seller growled. No one else will buy her. She is nothing. She cannot work. She cannot talk. She is broken. The man did not know why, but his heart felt heavy. He was lonely, yes. But this was something more. The way she sat so still with her head bowed. It was not weakness, it was silence. He felt something in her silence, something he could not explain. Without thinking, he reached into his pocket and dropped 3 credits into the alien's hand. The seller laughed again, his teeth shining like knives. She is yours, human fool. Take her and regret later. The cage door opened with a rusty sound. The girl did not move. The man stepped closer and bent down. Come, he said softly. His voice was gentle. For a moment she did not answer. Then slowly she stood. Her steps were small, like she carried heavy chains. The sack on her head moved as she breathed. People in the market laughed as the man led her away. A human buying. Trash, someone shouted. 3 credits for a ghost, another laughed. But the man did not care. He walked out of the market with her following. The cold night air hit his face. He could hear her soft breaths behind him, quick and scared. They walked through broken streets and empty alleys until they reached his small house. It was nothing but a tiny metal room with 1 bed and 1 table. He opened the door, let her step inside, and closed it quietly. The room was dark but safe. The girl stood in the middle, still with the sack on her head. Her hands trembled slightly. The man poured water into a cup and gave it to her. She did not move at first, but then she reached for it with shaking hands. She drank quickly, the water running down her chin. For the first time, the man saw she was not weak. She was hungry, she was thirsty, she was alive. He sat down on the chair and looked at her. You are safe here, he said, though he was not sure she understood. The girl turned her head, the sack still covering her face. She tilted it, as if listening. Her breathing slowed. The man thought of asking who she was, but something in his chest stopped him. He only said, Rest now. The girl walked to the corner, curled up on the floor, and stayed silent. Hours passed. The man lay awake, on his bed, listening to the soft sound of her breath. His thoughts would not rest. Why was she so cheap? Why did the seller laugh? What was hidden under the sack? He turned over and closed his eyes. But sleep did not come. At midnight, he heard movement. He opened his eyes slowly and saw her standing in the middle of the room. Her hands touched the sack. Slowly, carefully, she began to lift it. The man held his breath. The sack came off halfway, and he saw a glimpse of glowing skin. Not human skin, not normal skin. It shone faintly in the dark. His heart beat faster. The girl stopped and froze as if she knew he was watching. She pulled the sack down again quickly and sat back on the floor. The man closed his eyes, pretending to sleep, but his mind was racing. What was she hiding? What kind of being had he brought into his house? And why, out of all the people in the market, did he choose her? Outside, in the distance, strange lights flickered in the night sky, unseen by the man, unseen by the girl. The lights moved slowly, searching, hunting. The girl whispered a word under her breath, too soft for the man to hear. The word carried pain. The word carried fear. But the night swallowed it, and the lonely house stood in silence, holding a secret that would change everything. Morning came slowly. The weak sun touched the small metal house. The man opened his eyes and for a moment forgot the strange night before. Then he saw her, the girl with the sack still on her head, sitting silently in the corner. She had not moved from her place, like a statue waiting for orders. The man's chest ached with pity, yet also with fear. He whispered to himself, "What did I bring home?" He stood up, stretched, and poured water into a cup. When he turned, he saw her flinch at the sound. Her body trembled, as if she expected to be hit. The man spoke softly. "No one will hurt you here." His words meant little, but his tone carried kindness. Slowly, he placed the cup on the floor near her. She reached out, her thin fingers shaking, and lifted it under the sack. The sound of her drinking was gentle, almost childlike. The man looked away, giving her privacy, yet he could not stop his mind from circling around the truth. Who was she, and why was she so cheap? After a long silence, he spoke again. "You don't belong in a cage," he said. "You don't belong with chains." Her body stiffened, and she lowered the cup. The man's hand moved to the sack covering her head. For a moment he hesitated, wondering if it was right. Then slowly, gently, he reached out. She did not pull away, though her breath quickened. With care, he untied the rope that held the sack. The cloth slid down and fell to the floor. The man's breath caught in his throat. Her face was not human, yet not monstrous. Her skin glowed faintly, pale with silver lines that pulsed like living light. Her eyes were wide and luminous, a shade between blue and violet. Her scars told a story of pain, cuts, burns, marks from cruel hands, yet beneath the scars was a strange, fragile beauty. She blinked, staring at him with fear and confusion. The man did not step back, though his heart raced. He whispered, "You're not from here." Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. She only hugged her knees, hiding her glowing skin from him. The man felt a mix of wonder and sorrow. He had expected something strange, but not this. Not this girl who looked like she, carried both pain and light in her body. He sat down on the floor, keeping space between them. "I don't know your story," he said, "but you are safe now." Her eyes softened just a little, as if his voice reached her. Then she lifted her wrist, showing him something. On her skin was a small glowing mark, shaped like a broken crown. The man tilted his head, confused. He did not know what it meant, but it felt important. She quickly pulled her arm back, hiding the mark. The day passed slowly. The man gave her bread and more water. She ate carefully, as though she had never trusted food before. She walked around the room, touching the old metal walls. Her fingers glowed where they touched, leaving faint lines of light. The man watched in silence, unsure if it was power or memory. In the afternoon, she found a piece of old paper and charcoal on his table. She bent down and began to draw. Her hands moved quickly, creating shapes and symbols he did not understand. Circles, stars, long curved lines that looked like maps. When she finished, she pushed the paper toward him. Her glowing eyes looked at him, begging him to understand. He shook his head softly. "I don't know. I can't read it." Her face fell, sadness deeper than words could show. Night returned, bringing silence and cold air. The man lit a small lamp, its weak light filling the room. The girl sat by the window, staring at the empty street. Her glowing eyes reflected the flame. For a moment, the house felt less lonely. The man realized he no longer thought of her as a slave. She was something else, something important, but he could not yet name it. Then, as the hour grew late, he saw something strange. Outside the window, far away in the dark sky, lights flickered. Not stars, not ships he knew, but moving lights searching slowly. His chest tightened. He turned to warn her, but she was already standing, her body tense. Her glowing skin brightened as if reacting to the lights. She whispered something too soft for him to catch. Her face filled with fear. The man stepped closer. "What is it?" he asked. She looked at him, her lips, finally forming words broken and fragile. "They looking for me," she whispered, her voice heavy with dread. The man froze. Every instinct told him he had just stepped into danger far greater than he imagined. Yet when he looked into her glowing violet eyes, he felt something stronger than fear. He felt the beginning of a bond. He knew the world outside was changing. He knew his life would never be the same. And still, he whispered back to her, "You're safe here." But deep inside, both of them knew the truth. Safety was only a dream. The lights outside grew brighter, closer, and the night carried with it the promise of a storm. The days that followed were quiet, yet heavy with unspoken tension. The man and the alien girl shared the same small space, but words between them were rare. She spoke almost nothing, only small whispers when fear slipped from her heart. Most of the time she kept her silence, her glowing eyes always watching, always listening. The man did not push her. He understood that silence was not emptiness. It was her shield. And so he waited, hoping one day she would lower it. At first she stayed close to the corner of the room, curled up like a bird that feared open skies. She would not eat unless he placed food directly near her hands. She would not move unless he left space for her to breathe. Yet slowly, very slowly, she began to change. She would take the bread herself. She would pour water into her own cup. She even started to sweep the floor with a piece of old cloth, simple chores that made the small home less lonely. The man watched quietly, pretending not to notice, but inside he felt warmth grow. It had been years since anyone shared his home, even in silence. At night, when the world outside turned dark and dangerous, she would sit near the window, her glowing skin reflected against the glass, casting faint silver light across the room. The man often sat at the table, fixing broken tools or writing small notes to himself. He would glance at her sometimes, but he never asked questions. He feared the answers might break the fragile peace they had found. She seemed to sense this because even without words she stayed close. One evening, as the man returned from the market, he found her drawing again. She had taken the same old paper and charcoal. Her hand moved with purpose, creating circles and stars, curved lines that connected into strange maps. When he stepped closer, she looked at him with a mix of hope and fear. She pointed at the drawing, then at the sky outside. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Instead, she pressed her hand against her chest, then against the paper. The man understood, only a little, that this drawing was her home, her place far away among the stars. His chest tightened as he nodded slowly. "I see, you miss it," he whispered. She lowered her head, and though no tears fell, he could feel her sadness fill the room. That night something shifted. For the first time, she did not curl up in the corner. Instead, she sat on the floor near his chair, close enough to share the lamp's faint warmth. The man said nothing, but his heart felt strangely lighter. They sat in silence, yet it was not empty silence anymore. It was a bond being born, fragile but real. Days turned into weeks, and the girl's silence began to break. Not with full sentences, but with small sounds. A word here, a word there. At first she said water, pointing at the cup. Later she whispered, "Thank," her voice rough like dry leaves. Each word was like a treasure, rare and shining. The man smiled each time, encouraging her with kindness. He never forced her. He only listened. And slowly, she trusted him more. One night, as rain tapped against the roof, she whispered something different. She pointed at him, then at herself, and finally at the word she drew on the paper. The word was simple, written in shaky English letters. It said family. The man stared at it, his chest tightening until it almost hurt. Family. It was a word he had not spoken in years. His parents long gone, no wife, no children, only loneliness as his companion. Now this girl who had been sold for 3 credits whispered it like a prayer. He wanted to answer, to say yes, but his throat locked. Instead, he only nodded, his eyes shining with unspoken promise. But outside, shadows did not rest. Strange figures had begun to appear near the edges of the market. They asked quiet questions about a human who had bought something unusual. Some said they saw glowing lights in his window at night. Rumors spread like fire, and fire always brought hunters. The man felt it in his bones. Danger was approaching. He tightened the locks on his door, but in his heart he knew metal would not protect them forever. Still, in the quiet of the house, the bond between them grew. She laughed once, a soft sound, like broken glass healing. It happened when he spilled water on himself and cursed under his breath. She covered her mouth quickly, as if laughter was forbidden, but the man smiled. "It's good," he said. "You can laugh here." She tilted, her head unsure, then whispered, "Good," and smiled back. It was a small smile, but it lit up the room brighter than any lamp. Late one evening, the man stepped outside to gather scraps of wood. He felt eyes on him, the heavy weight of being watched. In the shadows across the street, a figure stood still, silent. Only the faint glow of red eyes gave him away. When the man blinked, the figure was gone. Fear filled his stomach like cold stone. He hurried back inside, bolting the door tight. The girl sensed his fear. She looked at him with those violet glowing eyes, and though she did not speak, she understood. That night, the house was wrapped in silence deeper than ever before. The girl curled near the window, her eyes fixed on the dark sky. The man lay awake, his mind restless. He could not escape the truth anymore. Whoever she was, whatever she carried, the world was coming for her. And yet, when she whispered family, once more before closing her eyes, he knew he would not let anyone take her away. The days of fragile peace could not last forever. The man knew it in his bones, and the girl felt it in her trembling silence. Their bond had grown strong, but danger had grown stronger outside. The shadows that watched from the streets came closer with each night. Rumors traveled quickly, and rumors always carried hunters. One evening, as the man returned from the market with a bag of stale bread, he felt a chill crawl up his spine. The streets were too quiet, too empty. He quickened his steps, but he could hear faint footsteps behind him. At first he told himself it was nothing, only his fear playing tricks. But then a low voice spoke from the dark, "Human, stop!" The man froze. His hand tightened on the bag. His eyes scanned the shadows, and from them stepped two figures. They were tall, wrapped in black cloth, their faces hidden. Their eyes glowed faint red like burning coals. One of them spoke again. "The girl, give her to us. She is not yours." The man's heart pounded. His first thought was fear, but his second thought was stronger. It was her face, her glowing eyes, her whisper of the word family. He shook his head. "No," he said, though his voice trembled. The figures moved closer. "Do not play foolish, human," one hissed. "She carries what does not belong to you. She is hunted. She is ours." The man stepped back slowly. His mind screamed at him to run, but his body would not move. The figures reached for him, and, in that moment, something impossible happened. The girl appeared at the door of the house, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. Her hands shook, but they burned with strange light. She raised them, and with a cry of fear mixed with anger, a burst of energy exploded from her palms. The air cracked like thunder, and the two figures were thrown back against the wall of the street. Sparks scattered across the ground. The man stared, wide-eyed, unable to believe what he had seen. The girl's chest rose and fell as if every breath was pain. Her hands still glowed, but weaker now. She turned to the man, her eyes wet with fear. "They never stop," she whispered. Her voice cracked, broken but heavy with truth. The man ran to her, placing himself between her and the fallen figures. One of the hunters struggled to his feet, his eyes filled with rage. "You cannot protect her," he spat. "She is marked, and the mark will bring more, always more." With those words, the two melted back into the shadows, leaving only silence behind. The man's heart thundered in his chest. He turned to the girl, her body trembling. She looked at him as if expecting anger, maybe rejection, but instead, he placed his hands on her shoulders. "You saved me," he said softly. She shook her head, whispering, "Danger. Follow me. You die if I stay." Her glowing eyes filled with sorrow, but the man shook his head firmly. "If you leave, I die anyway," he whispered. That night, the air inside the small house felt heavy. The girl sat near the window again, her body hunched, her scars shining faintly in the lamplight. She whispered to herself in her own language words the man could not understand. Her voice cracked like someone praying. The man watched her silently, his heart filled with both fear and determination. He knew the hunters would return, and next time they would not come alone. Yet deep inside he also knew he could not abandon her. Not now, not after seeing her pain. As the hours passed, the girl finally looked at him, her lips parted, and she spoke a full sentence in broken English. "They will never stop hunting me." Her voice was low, filled with certainty. Her hands clenched into fists, glowing faintly in the dark. The man felt the weight of those words. He understood now that his choice had tied him to something far greater than himself. "Still," he whispered back, "then let them come. We will fight." Her eyes widened at his words. For the first time, she did not look like a prisoner, nor like a slave. She looked like someone who belonged. She nodded slowly, and, though her eyes were wet, her face held a small, fragile strength. In that moment, the bond between them was no longer fragile. It was a promise, unspoken but strong. Outside, the streets were silent again, but silence was only a mask. The hunters had seen her power, and now they would spread word of it. The mark on her wrist glowed faintly in the shadows like a beacon calling across the stars. Somewhere far away, others would hear it, others would come. The man did not yet understand the full truth, but he felt it growing like a storm at the edge of the sky. When sleep finally came, it was restless. The man dreamed of fire and broken chains, of glowing eyes and endless shadows. The girl dreamed, too, her lips whispering names long lost, names that carried both love and pain. In the quiet of their small home, they both knew life would never return to what it was. The world outside had noticed them, and the first threat was only the beginning. The house no longer felt safe. Each night the man checked the locks again and again. Each day he searched the streets before stepping out. His heart was heavy with fear, but heavier still with the thought of losing her. The girl knew this too. Her glowing eyes carried guilt. She whispered often that she should leave, yet her steps never carried her out the door. She stayed, because something stronger than fear held her back. One evening, the man placed a small meal on the table. The bread was hard, the soup was thin, but it was all he had. She sat across from him, silent as always, but her eyes never left his face. After a long silence, he spoke. "You don't have to stay here if you don't want to." His voice trembled, not because he wanted her gone, but because he feared she would agree. She looked down, her fingers tracing the cracks in the wooden table. Slowly, she whispered, "If I go, I have nothing." Her voice broke. Then she looked at him again, and for the first time, she asked, instead of told, "If I stay, do I belong?" The question tore at his heart. For so long he had lived alone, with only silence and shadows to keep him company. Now this strange girl with scars and glowing skin had asked him if she belonged. He reached across the table, his hand trembling as it touched hers. "Yes," he whispered. "You belong here, with me." Her glowing eyes filled with water, not tears that fell, but tears that stayed shining. She lowered her head, but her lips curved into the smallest, shyest smile he had ever seen. From that night, their bond deepened. She began to help more, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She washed the bowls. She fixed broken cloth with her glowing threads. She even tried to cook, though the soup always burned. The man laughed softly, not at her, but with her. And for the first time, laughter filled the small house. It was not the sound of fear, but The sound of life returning. Days passed, and they began to speak more. Her English grew slowly. Each night she repeated his words, her voice shaky but determined. He corrected her gently, always patient. Sometimes she failed and laughed nervously, and he laughed too. The silence that once stood like a wall between them now broke piece by piece, and in the broken pieces something new was built, something fragile but precious. One evening the rain fell heavy outside. The girl sat near the lamp, her eyes watching the flicker of light. The man knelt before her, holding something small. It was not gold or jewels, only a thin ring made from twisted wire. He placed it in her hands. It's not much, he whispered, but it's real. She looked at it, her glowing eyes wide, then she looked at him. What mean? She asked softly. He took a deep breath. It means I choose you, not because of fear, not because of pity, but because I want you with me, always. Her body trembled. She pressed the ring against her chest. Her voice cracked as she whispered, You want me? He nodded. Yes, more than anything. For a moment, silence filled the room again, but this silence was not heavy. It was soft. It was full. Then she whispered one word that made his heart break and heal at the same time. Husband. The man's eyes stung. He nodded quickly. Wife, he answered. And with no witnesses, no priest, no crowd, only the rain and the dim lamp, they were joined, not by law, not by custom, but by choice. In that moment, loneliness was no longer his companion, and fear was no longer hers. They had found each other, and that was enough. For days after, the air in the house changed. They smiled more. They spoke more. Sometimes they even argued softly over simple things. Who should fetch water? Who should cook? But the arguments always ended in laughter. The girl began to hum strange tunes, songs from a world he did not know. The man listened, and though he could not understand, he felt peace, yet peace carried a shadow. On their wedding night, as the lamp burned low, the mark on her wrist began to glow brighter than ever. The broken crown pulsed like a heartbeat, filling the room with silver light. She tried to cover it, but the light only grew stronger. The man watched, his chest heavy. What does it mean? He asked. She shook her head, fear returning to her face. They will know, she whispered. Her voice shook. They will find me. The man reached for her hand, holding it tight. Let them come, he said firmly. We are together now. They cannot take that. She looked into his eyes, and though fear still lived there, love now lived there too. She nodded, resting her forehead against his chest. The mark on her wrist shone like a beacon, unseen eyes across the stars awakening to its call. Somewhere far away, ships stirred, hunters moved, and the echo of her name traveled like fire across the void. But inside the small home, a man and an alien girl held each other, their hearts bound not by chains, but by choice. They had chosen love, though they knew it might cost everything. The mark on her wrist did not stop glowing. Each night it pulsed brighter, each day it shimmered faintly under her skin. The man tried to ignore it, but deep down he knew the truth. Something out there had felt its call, and something was coming, closer. The girl knew it too. Her eyes often drifted to the sky, filled with both longing and fear. She whispered less, laughed less. Her silence returned like a shadow, heavy and unshakable. Then, one night, the sky tore open. It began with a low hum so deep it shook the walls of the small house. The man ran to the window and froze. Above the town, 3 enormous ships hovered, black against the stars. Their lights swept the ground like the eyes of hunting beasts. The people of the town screamed, doors slammed, torches lit the streets in panic. But the ships did not care. For them, they were searching for one thing. The girl stood in the middle of the room, her glowing skin brighter than ever. Her hands clutched her wrist, trying to hide the mark. Her voice shook as she whispered, "They find me." The man grabbed her shoulders. "We will not let them take you," he said. His voice was firm, but his heart raced with terror. He had no weapons strong enough, no walls thick enough. Yet, his resolve was stronger than iron. A loud crash shook the earth. A group of armored figures descended from the ship. Their armor gleamed silver. Their weapons pulsed with blue fire. They moved like shadows, but their eyes burned with cruel light. The man pulled the girl behind him as the door to their small home shook under heavy fists. "Open, human!" a voice roared. "She belongs to us!" The man shouted back, "She belongs to no one!" The words surprised even him, but they came from deep inside his soul. The door burst open, and the armored figures stepped in. There, weapons pointed, their helmets reflecting the glow of her skin. The girl cried out, but before they could touch her, the man charged. He swung a wooden chair, striking one of the soldiers. Sparks flew as the weapon clashed against metal. The soldier staggered but did not fall. Another raised his gun. But before he could fire, the girl lifted her hands. A wave of silver energy burst from her palms. The walls shook, the air cracked like thunder, and the soldiers were thrown back out into the street. The townspeople gasped as they watched from hiding. A human and an alien girl standing against warriors. From the stars, the man's chest heaved with effort, his hands bleeding. The girl swayed on her feet, her power draining her strength. But side by side they stood, defying the impossible. More soldiers descended, filling the street with the glow of their weapons. The man clenched his fists, ready to fight until the end. The girl looked at him, her voice soft but strong. "Together," she whispered. He nodded. "Together." The battle raged through the night. Soldiers fired beams of light that shattered walls. The man fought with anything he could grab: wood, stone, even his bare fists. The girl unleashed bursts of energy, her glowing skin blazing like a star. For every soldier they drove back, more descended. The ground trembled under the weight of the ships. The man was thrown to the ground, his body bruised and battered. But before the soldiers could strike him, the girl stood in front. Her body glowing so bright it hurt to look at her, she screamed. And a blast of silver light erupted, throwing the soldiers back once more. Silence followed for a moment. The soldiers did not rise this time. Instead, another figure stepped forward, taller and more commanding than the rest. His armor was gold, his eyes sharp and filled with authority. He looked at the girl, his voice calm but heavy. "Princess," he said. The man froze. The word cut through him like a blade. "Princess." He turned to her, and she could not deny it. Her glowing eyes, lowered in shame, the golden figure spoke again. "You are our lost heir. You belong to the crown, not to this world." The girl trembled. Her lips parted, but no words came. She looked at the man, her eyes full of fear. He shook his head. "You don't belong to them. You belong where you choose." The golden figure's gaze hardened. "You think love can protect her," he said coldly. "You are a human with nothing. She carries a legacy that cannot be denied." His soldiers stood behind him, waiting for his order. The air was thick with tension. The girl stepped forward, her body weak but her spirit strong. Her voice shook but carried weight. "I choose," she said. The golden figure tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. The girl turned to the man, reaching for his hand. Her glowing fingers intertwined with his rough, bleeding ones. "I choose him," she whispered. The golden figure's face darkened, but he did not strike. Instead, he raised his hand, signaling his soldiers to step back. "Your choice is foolish," he said, "but it is yours. For now," he roared. Soldiers retreated, their shadows melting back into the ship. The golden figure gave one final warning. "You may hide, but danger will follow. The mark cannot be erased, and one day you will face the full weight of your choice." With those words, he vanished into the ship, and the night grew silent once more. The man and the girl stood in the ruined street. The townspeople watched in silence, some with fear, some with awe. The girl leaned against him, her body weak. Her voice trembled. "They know now, they will always know." The man held her close, his voice steady. "Then let them come. We will face them, together." Above them, the ships disappeared into the stars, but the warning lingered in the air like smoke. The night after the ships vanished was heavy. With silence, the man and the alien girl sat inside their broken home. The walls cracked, the table burned, the air filled with the smell of smoke. Yet in the middle of the ruin, they held each other, his arms wrapped around her trembling body, her glowing eyes pressed against his chest. They had survived the arrival, but survival was not the same as safety. In the days that followed, the town looked at them with different eyes. Some people feared them, whispering that she was cursed, that she would bring more death. Others looked with wonder, saying the man was brave, saying the girl was something divine, but none dared come too close. The man did not care for their whispers. He cared only for her, for the way she held his hand tightly each night as if it were the last time. The girl spoke more now. Her words were broken, but her meaning was clear. "They come again," she said one morning as she traced the mark on her wrist. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they come." The man nodded, his eyes steady. "Then we will be ready," he answered. But inside, his heart carried a different thought. He knew he could never fight an army forever. He knew their only hope was to build something stronger than fear. Seasons changed, and life inside the small house slowly grew warmer. The man built new walls, stronger and thicker. The girl filled the rooms with small touches, carving strange symbols that glowed softly in the dark. Together they created a home, not perfect, not rich, but alive. She laughed more. He smiled. More. Their bond was no longer fragile. It was solid. It was love, plain and unshakable. Then came the day she placed his hand gently on her stomach. Her glowing eyes shimmered with both fear and joy. "Life," she whispered. He froze, his heart pounding. Then tears filled his eyes. He nodded quickly. "Our child," he whispered. She smiled softly. "Family," she answered. And with that word the world changed once again. Months passed, and the small house filled with new light. The girl's body glowed brighter as her child grew within her. The man cared for her with everything he had, fetching water, cooking food, building warmth. At night he whispered stories of the stars, to her belly, telling the unborn child of hope, of courage, of love. The girl listened with glowing eyes, her head resting against his shoulder. For the first time in years he felt whole. When the child was born, the world held its breath. The baby's skin glowed faintly like the mother's, but his small eyes were deep brown like the father's. A mix of two worlds, a symbol of something new. The man wept as he held his son, his hands trembling. The girl touched the baby's cheek, whispering softly in her alien tongue. Words of blessing, words of love. They named him Star because he was both light and hope. Years passed and their small family grew. They built a hidden home far from the town, deep in the hills where no one could find them easily. There they raised their children, for soon Star was not alone. Two more came, each carrying pieces of both worlds. Together they laughed, together they cried, together they lived. The man no longer felt the cold of loneliness. The girl no longer felt the chains of fear. They had built the family they both longed for, but danger did not forget them. Sometimes at night, strange lights flickered across the sky, reminding them of the warning. Sometimes shadows appeared near the edges of the hills, watching, waiting. Yet no matter how close danger came, they faced it together. The children grew strong, learning both the strength of human hands and the power of alien light. The man taught them courage, the girl taught them wisdom, and together they built something greater than either world had ever known. One evening, as the sun fell behind the hills, the man stood outside with his wife beside him. Their children played in the grass, their laughter echoing through the valley. The girl leaned against him, her scars glowing softly in the fading light. "Do you regret?" she asked, her voice gentle but filled with memory. He shook his head, smiling. "Never," he answered. "I paid 3 credits that day, but what I gained was more than all. The stars." Her glowing eyes filled with tears. She pressed her forehead against his, whispering, "Family." The sky above shimmered with countless stars. Some of them carried danger. Some of them carried enemies. But none of them could take away what they had built. For in a broken house in a lonely man's heart, love had grown into something unshakable. It had built a family beyond blood, beyond chains, beyond stars. And though the future held storms, they would face them side by side, a lonely man and the alien girl he once bought for 3 credits, now bound forever not by price, but by love.